Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our RGMC Online Rally East Edition. We're really happy that you all could join us tonight. So we just have a couple rules here. So right now, you all are muted. So we may be opening up the channel for you to unmute yourself and ask questions later on in the meeting. For the time being, if you could please use the chat function to ask any questions, introduce yourself, react to anything you hear tonight that you find really exciting, please go ahead. You also have the ability to use the live transcript. So just press the CC button for closed captioning, and you'll be able to read everything that's being said tonight. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Balkwill, who will be doing a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Mike Balkwill. I work with the Water Watchers and as the campaign manager for the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. In the land acknowledgement, what we want to do always is begin by recognizing the stewardship for these lands by Indigenous peoples for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And as time goes on, we're learning more and more about the ways in which Indigenous people actually managed the land and took care of it, and kept it abundant. And that all changed with colonization. And it's important when we acknowledge the history of their care, their history on this lands, that we acknowledge that the colonialism was a violent dispossession of the relationship between Indigenous people and their lands, of which we're still, those who've come here to settle are still understanding. And it's a deep truth that we have to recognize first before any reconciliation can happen, that the dispossession was violent and affected the whole relationship between people and the land. And it's important for us to recognize that the purpose of colonization when Europeans came to North America was to take land and to take resources and to take control of the land. And that colonial project might sound like something that happened in history, but it's actually continuing still today. The trees are still being harvested, the minerals are still being mined, the fish are still being taken, and in our case, aggregate gravel is being mined, all without the proper consent of Indigenous people and without the recognition of their treaty rights. And we're all treaty people. And it's important that we hold our governments accountable federally and in Ontario to fulfill their constitutional obligations, our constitutional obligations with Indigenous peoples. And it's because of that we've included in our demand for a moratorium on new approvals for gravel mining in Ontario, that before a moratorium should be implemented, and one of the changes that needs to be made to the process for approving them is to fully recognize the obligations of our government to Indigenous nations. So it's with that in mind that we acknowledge the land on which we live. I think it's over to you. I think you're going to welcome people.
Thank you so much, Mike, and welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you all take the time to join us this evening at the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition's Online Rally East Edition. My name is V Bui. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling today from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am a regional organizer with the Council of Canadians, and the Council of Canadians is a proud member, coalition member of the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. Over the past few months, we've been working on a great campaign to demand the moratorium on gravel mining, as Mike has alluded to. And as part of this work, we have been bringing this online rally across the province to both highlight local struggles across the province, because gravel mining is a reality that affecting the natural landscape, the communities across Ontario. So we've been to highlighting fights in the GTA. We recently visited Northern Ontario, and now we're bringing this to Eastern Ontario. So we'll be hearing from a lot of exciting speakers today about various work that you all have been doing to fight this massive extractive industry. And I'll pass it back to Mike to just go over some details of that agenda.
Thanks, V. I think there's a slide we're going to see with the agenda. And in a moment, we're going to play a 2-minute video which summarizes the key issues. Katie Krylov will expand upon those after we've seen the video, and Katie is with the Wilderness Committee. She'll introduce herself more, and the Wilderness Committee is also a partner in the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. And then we'll have a pre-recorded message from Janet Klein. Kathryn Lindsay is live with us today, and we'll be talking about Renfrew County. And Ashley Miceli will be speaking with us. She's live as well and doing a presentation on a recent application in Almonte, the burnt lands. It's called the burnt lands application. Now, we had 80 people RSVP'd for this event, but a big storm happened on the weekend. And we've heard from people that their power has not come back. In fact, it was touch and go about whether Ashley was going to be available to join us, and we're very glad she is. Her power came back on. She may say more about that. So we had contemplated postponing the event, and then we thought, well, it's getting too close to the provincial election. People are busy. It might be hard to reschedule. So we're going to go ahead. We do record this, and we can make it available to people who RSVP'd. Thank you very, very much for being with us tonight. We've got an interesting program. I see a couple of people have introduced themselves in the chat box. Thank you, Peter Franzen, and thank you, David Jeffrey, for introducing yourself. And I invite everybody who's listening to do the same thing. Say hi, tell us where you are. And as we go through all the speakers, if you have a question, please put your question in the chat box, and we'll either answer it as we go, people will answer it through the chat box, or we've actually got a Q&A period where we'll stop and say any questions at all. And we'll take the questions then. And because we're small numbers, I'm saying to the people to Rachel and Horeen, who are behind the scene, who are producing this for us, and thank you, Rachel and Horeen, we'll probably turn people's mics on so that we can have some direct dialogue. I think we're in a small enough group we can do that. And then we've got some take action steps for everybody. So I always like to say, are we at the same meeting? So that agenda sounds like the agenda you planned on. Put your thumb up in the screen, or use the fancy little reaction buttons down here, or say something to the chat box. And I think that's all my housework. Am I right, V? Have I done all my housekeeping? All the meeting housekeeping? Okay, so we're going to watch a video in just a moment. Graham Flint is the narrator. Some of you will know Graham from his days with Gravel Watch, and he has been engaged for almost 2 decades in opposing, supporting groups who are opposing gravel mining in their community. He has a deep, substantial, broad knowledge, which he uses in this video to explain the core issues. So I'm going to ask if we can roll the tape.
We have these scars of gravel mines all across Ontario. They are everywhere. I mean, most people would be surprised to hear that there's over 5,000, almost 5,600 gravel sites in Ontario. I mean, it starts with just the scraping off of all the soils that have any capability of supporting life. The sites themselves have these things called berms, which are basically piles of soil around the perimeter of them. So you can't really see them when you drive by, but if you see this sort of strange hill of dirt on either side of a rural road, there's probably a gravel mine behind it. Even if you're not living next to a gravel mine, this issue should matter to you. The last thing we should be doing is creating more highways and sprawl, and that's exactly what the majority of gravel is used for. These are not benign uses of land. These are socially and environmentally destructive. Gravel in the ground has a purpose. It filters our groundwater. It provides clean drinking water, helps with flood management when there's excessive rain. Pretty well every gravel operation in the province deals with water at some point. Either they're digging below the water and they need to deal with a water table, or they're using large amounts of water to wash and prepare the gravel. Gravel mining and climate change feed off each other. It's time to connect the dots, that all the problems that we're having in all the different communities really are related. We actually have a policy in Ontario that says there's no need to show need for establishing a new gravel mine. So the industry has permission to dig up on an annual basis 13 times what we actually use. That's a policy of a bygone era when we thought the planet was just something we could take and take and take and not be respectful of it at all. But the reality is that an awful lot of sites sit dormant, and that's the horrible secret of this industry. The dormant gravel mines tell us that we've got more gravel mines in Ontario than we need. They're a clear indication that the industry is out of control. Successive governments have failed us. It's time for us to join together in a common voice and say, stop. So our call is to pause new approvals until we can look at the issues associated with gravel mining and address them in a sustainable way. My name is Graham Flint, and I've been dealing with gravel mining for almost 2 decades now. The time for a moratorium is now.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us. I hope you found that video as impactful as I do in framing the nature of the problems around gravel mining in Ontario and what we need to do about it. My name is Katie Krelove. I'm the Ontario campaigner for the Wilderness Committee, one of the partner organizations for the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition, along with Water Watchers, Council of Canadians, and Environmental Defence. I personally was drawn to this coalition because I regularly receive emails in my inbox from people desperately concerned about proposed gravel mines in their communities, with questions about the process and how they can have an impact on land use decisions around gravel mining. And while every community's struggle is different in ways, they all are similar in people feeling like the process is stacked against them and against their concerns about valued natural heritage lands, about species at risk habitat, health issues, water quality, climate issues, and more. So it's the people standing up for these things in their communities, spending untold resources and going through, this process of learning the procedures only to find out that it's broken. And yet they soldier on. That inspires me to be a part of this coalition. And the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition is proud that we represent 38 communities across Ontario that have signed on with us. And I'll just ask this first slide, Hareen, if you can put it up. That will just, if it does go up, reiterate what some of the stats that RGMC has been putting out there that really, we think, frame the nature of this problem in a way that people can understand. So 13 times more gravel licensed each year than is used annually in Ontario. And that amounts to 300,000 acres of land licensed to the industry. 20% more has been, and that's 20% more land disturbed over the last 15 years. So more and more land has been licensed, whereas the amount of gravel that Ontario uses per year has stayed relatively the same in that same amount of time. So what we're trying to do is bring the issues about gravel mining that occur in local communities and raise them to the level that's needed to get provincial action. It's the province of Ontario that sets the rules for gravel mining. And that's where we need to put the pressure to get things fixed. And really, Reform Gravel Mining Coalition is the only organization taking on that challenge in the province. The gravel mining industry is also an industry that is out of control in many ways. It's not based on need, as was mentioned in the video, but on land speculation and profits. It contributes to the climate crisis and urban sprawl. Well, the industry has cried wolf for decades, saying we're going to run out of gravel. As I mentioned, the amount that we consume stays relatively the same. So next slide, please. So the solution that RGMC is proposing is the DAM campaign to demand a moratorium now on new gravel mining applications. And this is a metaphor, or moratorium is a metaphor that's been used in terms of the climate crisis, in terms of like an overflowing bathtub. So yes, if you've got to clean up the mess of water on the floor and you've got to figure out a way to drain the bathtub, but the very first thing you need to do is turn off the tap. A moratorium will create the space that's necessary to do what's needed to reel in the gravel mining land grab in Ontario. It's not going to impact the supply of gravel in Ontario. What the moratorium will do is say, we, the people of Ontario, demand our government impose an immediate pause on new gravel mines until an independent panel can draft a new way forward, one that will honor First Nation treaties, protect groundwater, protect farmland, protect endangered species, and give people in their communities more of a say on land use decisions. So that's where we're coming from. As was mentioned, these rallies that we've been holding, I think this is the 5th one, have been to hold up the voices of those community members that have been fighting these gravel pits and know the terrain in more ways than one. So it's my pleasure to announce our first local speaker, Janet Klein. Janet lives in Peterborough County and has been involved as a community member with other citizens fighting the Dudney Mountain Quarry since 2012. And we are glad to have Janet here to tell her story.
Hi, my name is Janet Klein, and welcome to the Zoom rally tonight. And welcome to beautiful Nogies Creek. My husband and I actually retired here in 2009, and we expected to have a very quiet retirement. But in 2012, we received a flyer in our mailbox saying that a 425-acre mega quarry application was being brought before our council as they needed a zoning change from rural residential to aggregate extraction to be able to open the quarry. Well, that was the beginning of our opposition to the Dudney Mountain Quarry. There were 500 people at a public meeting at one point opposing this quarry application, but nevertheless, the zoning change was approved by our municipality of Trent Lakes in 2013. We then had approximately 14 of us appeal this decision to the Ontario Municipal Board, or the OMB as it was called, that same year, 2013. The OMB did have a 16-day hearing in 2015, but still we had not reversed the decision. Our lawyer, Eric Gillespie, appeared on our behalf before various other courts over the years, and a decision came in our favor in 2018. 6 years after that original flyer had landed in our mailbox, the zoning reverted back to rural residential. In the past 2 years, the current owner has brought documents to council that makes it very clear that getting this quarry up and running is still a priority. This has been 10 years of our life time and money. However, there is a small group of us that still feel so strongly about many things that this quarry will endanger. Our precious environment is one of them. This property was visited by professors and students from Trent University in the past to study rare features and the threatened critters that live there. There's even a PhD paper written on a rare Parker fen that is found on the potential quarry property. There are butternut trees in the vicinity, and there are many wetlands where you can find blandings turtles, and the whippoorwill has also been found on the property in the clearings. This property has known karst topography, and there are huge caves in the vicinity of the quarry property. Because of its proximity to Nogies Creek, there is always a worry of contamination to the water from any kind of industry. All of us who live here have wells, and some people still take filtered water directly from the creek. Nogies Creek flows down to Pigeon Lake and into the Trent system. Everything is connected. The proposed quarry will be in close proximity to the Provincial Fish Sanctuary, which is part of Nogies Creek also. This special place was studied by Dr. Edwin Crossman many years ago, and his work, I believe, is still documented at the Royal Ontario Museum. He studied bullfrogs in this sanctuary. And we also have muskies that spawn in Nogies Creek every spring. The past 13 years living in Trent Lakes has heightened my passion for all facets of the environment, including the wildlife and our precious water. And our small group will continue to oppose the Dudney Mountain Quarry application. A very sad fact is that the former owner of that property, Mr. Art Parker, knew his property was special, and he had started the process to have the property protected for the long term. But it never came to pass before his own passing, and it was sold to the current owner. How can our environment survive while the other one goes on? Why, in the most recent provincial policy statement, was the criteria of need removed from the review process? Please support this moratorium that is not to ban anything, but to stop and take a breath, reassess, and have meaningful discussion with all involved parties, and reevaluate the need for this precious resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for being with us remotely. It felt like you were right here, and I liked hearing all the sounds in the background. Kind of put me there. V, I know you and I are talking about this a little bit for a couple of minutes before we introduce the next speaker. And one of the things that is familiar to me is that everybody's surprised when a quarry application shows up. I mean, Janet's telling us they went there for their quiet retirement, and boom. And there's a variation that I hear on that in many, many communities. I was also struck by, and I want to emphasize this, the notion that everything is connected. And there's two things I'd like to say, which are themes that we've heard in other places. One of the problems with the approval process is they look at a very, very narrow spot. They look at the actual site where the quarry or the pit is being proposed, and they don't look at the overall effects. They don't look at the effects that connect between different places. And you know, it seems almost silly to have to say this, but we know that the ecosystem is connected. We know that the water systems are connected. We know they're connected to species and habitat and people's drinking water, et cetera, et cetera. That's common sense. And yet in these applications, they isolate all of that and they don't have to take into account really the interconnections. And they also don't have to take into account a full life cycle. And it's why actually part of why we started the coalition is that all of our backyards are connected, you know, and the industry and often MPPs, the government representatives, will want to characterize people who are trying to protect their community and protect their local environment. Will characterize them as NIMBYs, not in my backyard, when in fact all of our backyards are connected. And particularly in terms of the climate crisis, the climate crisis is a global crisis, and we don't have the ability to control the whole climate. In fact, the way that we can take positive action in face of and limit climate chaos is to protect our own backyard and to protect all of our backyards together. and unnecessary gravel mining hurts everybody. Bea, I think you're going to introduce the next speaker.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. And really appreciate hearing from Janet and the birds in the background. Our next speaker, I know Kathy Lindsay as one of the founding members of the Kitchissippi Ottawa Valley chapter of the Council of Canadians, but Kathy's also a multi-generational resident of Renfrew County with a long history of scientific studies. That she is a chair and program volunteer with the Bon Cher River Watershed Project, a community organization. She was the research scientist, policy analyst, and protected areas program manager with Environment and Climate Change Canada for over 30 years. She was the adjunct research professor in Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Carleton University, and she's the founder and co-director emeritus of the Geomatic and Landscape Ecology Lab at Carleton. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I got involved with this effort because what I'm seeing in Renfrew County is the outpouring of people wanting to come into rural areas for a quality of life. And what I'm seeing is that the land use planning processes that we have are actually jeopardizing that quality of life rather than protecting. And I think that the gravel mining industry is a really strong example of how that happens. And I'm not fighting a gravel pit application here in the county. In fact, I'm just learning really about it. And so what I wanted to share, but I'm very concerned about it because we do have a lot of gravel pits and I see them. And so what I wanted to share today was, being of a research background, I'm trying to understand what is the scale of the problem that we're actually dealing with, where is the information, and how do we inform ourselves so that we can engage convincingly with elected officials, with government officials who are supposed to be regulating this industry. And so I put together a small slide presentation, series of four slides, to talk about a specific data set that I've become aware of as I've been involved with the coalition. So if I could have the first slide, please. Well, I do want to say I'm also sitting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe First Nation, and I'm actually at my family's cottage here on the shores of the Kitchissippi Ottawa River, and very grateful. So this is a data set that I became aware of. So it's called the Ontario Pits and Quarries map. And so here's a little cutout essentially of Renfrew County. So we have Algonquin Park is the big green blob there up to the upper left, and Renfrew County goes along that upper edge and off to the east. And of course, we're talking about eastern regions. So there's Lanark County and Frontenac, Lennox, Addington, and others. So I've started exploring this information base, and it started as a mapping tool, but clearly it's extremely cumbersome to try and understand what's actually going on when you have data at such an aggregated level. And so I was in communication with the very long acronym of the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources, and Forestry about this data set. And there is a way of actually searching it so you can get the more detailed information in a like in a spreadsheet type format. And so that's what I'm going to explore here a little bit with you on what I've been learning about my county up here in Renfrew. So next slide, please. plus I sort of put the slide presentation together. It's a little bit of a how-to if you actually wanted to explore this for your own area of interest. And in fact, I'm kind of interested to see, as I delve into it more, sort of what is the scale of the problem and where are, you know, we know that there are specific locations that are of concern, but what is the broader area of concern in terms of the province in general? And of course, we know that the Greater Toronto area is a hotbed for this. But I'm also interested to know sort of where are those key places, like the Bertlands, for example. So I'm looking forward to learning about that. It's just downriver from me here in Eastern Ontario. So the kind of information in the data set is what is the status of the location? Is it active or is it not active? And there was some comment about that many are not active, but could be, suggesting, as has been said, that we're way over designated in terms of land use and areas of land than we really need. It also tells you who actually owns the location, the pit or quarry, what type it is. Is it a pit? Is it a quarry? Or in many cases, it can actually be both. How large is the license for extraction? And it's in tons. The other curious thing about this data set, though, is there's actually no explanation of what the units of measure are. And so I've been trying to get the ministry to give me some guidance on, are we talking, you know, metric? Are we talking hectares? Are we talking acres? Or anyway. And another curious piece of information is some of these locations actually have unlimited tonnage. So they can take out as much as is there. And so it tells you whether or not they do or they don't. And then what that maximum amount of extraction theoretically could be. One data field that I'm particularly interested in is the question around the water status. Is it above water? Is it below water? Or in some cases, they don't actually even, they don't even actually know at this point. How much of the area is licensed? So how big is it? The name of it, where it's located, and specifically within municipal boundaries, the client, which ministry district is it in, and then some details about where do they actually get the information. And in getting more educated about this data set, the person I've been interacting with, I've written down here in case anybody wants to follow up. So it's Stephen Strong from the ministry. Next slide, please. So what is the situation in Renfrew County? Well, I like to call it, I mean, we talk a lot about the GTA, but there's definitely emerging what I'm starting to label as a GOA. So it's the Greater Ottawa area effect. So people are moving westward, partly because of property values, partly because they're double laning the highway 17 into 417. So it's quite reasonable to come out into the county now. And it's actually creating issues for those of us who actually live here already, which will be no doubt not a surprise to you folks, in terms of increasing housing demand, which then increases prices. And for many people who live here, including my kids, housing is becoming unaffordable. And in fact, if you could even find one, much less trying to rent even. So with COVID and more people working from home, being able to work from, having to work from home, and being facilitated to work from home, it's really created a huge real estate boom up here in the county, as people are moving not only from Ottawa, westward from Ottawa, but even from Toronto, and even from places like Vancouver, for example. So as I mentioned, the double laning of the highway is definitely facilitating that process. It's double lane to Arnprior already. And Renfrew is actively, the double laning to Renfrew is actively under construction right now. There's also a perverse, in my view, situation with municipalities because their only source of funds is property tax. So of course they're supportive of development because they see it as increasing their budgets. And that has led to a lot of exurban development, which is consuming rural lands, particularly farmland, which, although it's not class 1 here, it might be class 2 or class 3, it's still farmland and has been for decades, couple of centuries. And it's changing our rural culture. We have subdivisions going up in the middle of cornfields outside of existing urban areas. So clearly the aggregate and quarry extraction is part and parcel in this process because that is what's being used for the development. Next slide, please. So what I've done next is to try and understand in the county then, where are the key locations that we may want to focus on in terms of understanding the issue around aggregate extraction. And so what I did, there are 239 sites. I think when I first did a rough estimate, it was higher than that, which was when I was using the mapped information, not the database. So definitely you can get much more precise information using the actual underlying data for the map. And so what I've done here is just take, so I've summarized the situation for the county in the blue tab across the top. So we have 239 sites, 214 are pits, 12 are quarries, 13 are both pits and quarries. So it's over 5,500 hectares that have been licensed for aggregate extraction. 3.5% of those locations, and I don't actually know what area that represents at this point, are below water. So they're mining below the water table. Now, and I just pointed out here that there are 7 of those 239 sites that actually have no information. So the ministry actually doesn't know whether they're above water or below water. Here is the tonnage. Big number. Again, it includes 11 sites that are unlimited. So we don't, this is an underestimate. It's a minimum estimate of what the tonnage can be. And then I've split it out by municipality, the number of sites, which accounts for 81% of the 239. So what we see now is that the Pembroke area, which is Laurentian Valley Township, has the most number of sites, followed by Boucher Valley Township, which is the Eganville area. And then on down from Whitewater, which is Cobden, Foresters Falls, Whitewater region, big tourist area for Whitewater. And then we go on down to Kilhaggy Richards, Head Clara Maria, which is the very northern portion of the county, Admaston Bromley, which is right in my neighborhood. And in fact, I'm sitting here in McNabb Braeside as we're speaking, with Petawawa also having, significant, what, 13 sites. Again, I haven't sort of split it out by tonnage or by area or tonnage, but could do. So I think that's actually the last slide. Try one more, but I don't think so. Yeah. So, I'm just really trying to understand what the scope of the problem is and who is it that we need to talk to get a better understanding of what the issues are. I know that the coalition has done presentations on issues around water quality, around road quality, around the fact that the aggregate industry doesn't pay its fair share of taxes. So we as residents and property owners are subsidizing the industry through road maintenance that's required, given the weight of the vehicles that are using our rural roads. So yeah, that's kind of my issue. So I look forward to hearing about, some of the ones, some, very particular sites. And who knows, it may well be that I'm going to end up getting involved in something like this as the exurban development continues westward into my county. So thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. And I like the part where you said, looks like maybe I'm going to get involved. I like that sound of that. And I think there's two things I'd like to comment on. One is that I think developing a regional focus is useful and interesting. And I think you're kind of modeling something here for us. And we have some other volunteers who've been working with this data as well and who are very familiar with it. So I'm going to connect with you offline to see if you're interested in connecting with them, because I think I see your thumbs up. I think it'll help you, and that will enable you to help us more too. And I also saw that Becky Jory, and I see you on screen there, Becky. Becky said she would speak to the Dudney Mountain too. So what I want to propose is that we go next to Ashley to talk to us about the burnt lands, hard for me to say, burnt lands situation. And then we're going to come back and into a kind of a Q&A. And Becky, we're going to bring you on the screen then, if that's okay. So Ashley's going to introduce herself more. Ashley contacted us recently. They've got a surprise too in their backyard, something that's just happened. And so we're very pleased, Ashley, that you're here and can present to us tonight. So over to you.
Hi, thanks, Mike. I'll see if Maureen, I'm not sure if you're able, you can pull up the slides at any time for the presentation here. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone, Mike and Rachel and the rest of the team for inviting me to attend tonight. So my name is Ashley Miceli, and I am from the west end of Ottawa, and I'm part of a group known as the Friends of Burnt Lands, and we are working to actively oppose a quarry extension in our area. So I guess I'll tell you a little bit tonight, I guess, more about who we are and what we're up against and what we're working to do about it. So the Friends of Burnt Lands, as I mentioned, we're a group of concerned residents. We're in the area that kind of spans, the burnt land spans the area in the west of Ottawa, as well as in Mississippi Mills, which is part of Lanark County. And the burnt lands is an alvar, and an alvar is a unique environmental feature, and it has some plain and prairie-like characteristics. It has a really thin soil on a limestone plain. And it contains a bunch of rare protected plant and animal species. And the Burnt Lands Alvar has been designated as an area of natural and scientific interest. And it's also municipally zoned as environmentally protected land. And I'll mention as well that it is part of the territory of the Algonquins of Pequot-Kanakin. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what we are looking to oppose. So there's a proposal in place from Thomas Kavanagh Construction Limited to extract below the water table on this protected land. So they've applied to the City of Ottawa to rezone the land from environmental protection to a mineral extraction zone. And they've also applied for a Class A license under the Aggregate Resources Act, excavate up to 2 million tons of aggregate from a below the ground water table quarry. And this proposed quarry site would be adjacent to an existing quarry, and it would extend this site by about 45 acres for a total area of nearly 400 acres. Next slide, please. So there are multiple reasons for us to oppose this quarry, and I'd like to thank Janet and Kathy for going before me, because I think it's clear that we share many of these same concerns. And a big one for us is the environmental risk. So by overturning these protections, it could damage this ecologically sensitive land, and it could threaten the native plant and animal species that live there. The Alvar is one of the largest and most diverse in the region, and It's home to a number of rare vegetation types, birds and insects, and there have been 94 different types of birds that have been identified in and around the Alvar. And not only could this impact the environment, but it can impact, and it would impact, the drinking water of residents and the water that feeds into these environments too. And it could increase the likelihood and severity of drought, which could impact agricultural land around the area. And it could also decrease our community's protection in the event of wildfires. And in fact, some of the ponds in the area that are fed by these aquifers, they have been used in the past to fight wildfires in the area. And so there is significant concern that that ability could be limited. And as I don't need to speak to you folks about this, be preaching a bit to the choir here, but our area really does not need another quarry. The supply is there in this application. It does nothing for us. Next slide, please. So a group of residents, the Friends of Burnt Lands, we've gathered together and we are actively opposing this. And in addition to erecting signs to notify residents of some of the implications of the quarry, and there's one example here, we all have other activities underway as well. So we've been distributing press releases to the media. We've been reaching out to environmental organizations. We've received some guidance from CELA, the Canadian Environmental Law Association. We've participated in roundtables with MPs and have been contacting other levels of government as well to draw attention to the issue. And we're currently preparing to increase our fundraising efforts so that we can obtain some legal counsel and fund some expert reviewers as well. So one example is we're holding a garage sale in the next weekend to try to raise some more funds for our cause. Next slide, please. So now I guess, to the crux of the reason why I'm here today, and I guess that's to also ask for some support. So I think that our efforts in this case, they align really well with what the RGMC's goals are, which is to impose a moratorium on all new gravel extraction licenses in the province. And this effort really does build from the ground up, and it's from the municipal level that we can really start to see these changes happen. And really any success at blocking these new local licenses is only going to benefit the whole province. Any precedents on this front, they can reinforce the coalition's goals, and any decisions that work in our favor can sway political minds. So I guess I'm here as well to ask for your support. And so I've highlighted a few options here for how you can help us to bring attention to the issue in our area and help us to take action against it. So we're currently in the middle of a public consultation process under the Aggregate Resources Act. And so any comments can be received until May 30th. So I don't know if these slides will be distributed after the meeting, but feel free if you want to take a screenshot or if you have your camera handy and can take a photo. These are really this is the process that we need to follow in order to get as many comments received by that final date of May 30th. As well, there's also, you can record your environmental objections through the Environmental Registry of Ontario, and they've included the ERO number there. So that can be searched online through their database or through the registry. And you can submit your comments by clicking on a button in that there too. And so we really would appreciate comments from anybody who feels as strongly as we do about the environmental protections that would be overturned in this case. And then finally, we have Facebook groups. So the Friends of Burnt Lands, we're an active community of about 140 people, and we would welcome you to come join us. You can read what we're up to, as well as participate or reach out to show your support. That would all be appreciated. So thanks so much for listening. If you turn to the final slide there, that's my contact information. So you can feel free to reach out through the Facebook page, or you can also feel free to reach out to me directly. And we appreciate all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Ashley. And we appreciate you being here tonight. And we, some of those links are being put in the chat box for people, but we're going to send, something we can do, Ashley, is we can send an email out to the whole contact list. We have about 3,000 people on our contact list, and we can invite them to take this action. And it is important, you may know this, but it's important for our audience to know that anybody in any community can register their comment through the ERO and can register an objection to that site in your community. You don't have to live in the community to register an objection. So we will promote those out to other people. Ashley, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We've got some time, and I'm checking the chat box. I don't see any questions, and we were going to go to Q&A period, but Katie, I'm kind of calling out to here because Becky said she could speak to the Dudney Mountain, and I'm wondering if the two of you want to come on the screen and have a dialogue, have some dialogue about the Dudney Mountain, which was the site Janet Klein talked about. Do you want to do that, Katie? You're muted, Katie.
Oh, yeah, of course I am.
So I'm going to ask people behind the screen to turn on Becky's microphone. There you are.
Hi, Becky. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I think you have a quite personal story to tell about the Dudney Quarry as well, the one that Janet was talking about.
Yeah, so I am an appellant to the Dudney Mountain Quarry, have been for the last 10 years with my friend Janet, met through this whole quarry process. It's amazing the amount of friends that you make in a situation like this. I mean, a terrible situation, but a good way to make friends. Like her, I found out from a flyer stuffed in my mailbox, and I actually live right on the haul route. So we were a little bit surprised to find out that we weren't actually advised of such a project. The project that we were looking at was a 400-acre quarry. There was an on-site concrete plant in there, and the tonnage was unlimited. So like other people have spoke to, you get kind of sidelined by it. So for us, the environmental impact was huge. We're huge nature lovers out here. But another big concern for us was the haul route. We live directly off the haul route. It's a dead end road. So what goes up must come down. And the numbers were terrifying. You know, we were looking at phase 1 was 32 trucks an hour up a dead end road, and phase 2 was going to double to 61 trucks an hour. And we're talking a dead end dirt road. So the quarry process was really life altering for us, to the point where we actually brought the largest opposition to anything our municipality's ever seen. Janet spoke to the fact that we had a public meeting, over 500 people showed up. We had fundraisers that were well attended. We had huge community support, and we couldn't have done it without our community support. So having the support of the community is super important. Feel like I was in my 20s when all this started, and I was a little bit naive. I really didn't think when we showed so much support and passion behind an opposition to something that the municipality would support it, but their answer to us was that the province wanted it. And that's the message that our municipality was getting, was that they felt powerless in these decisions because it was the province that wanted the aggregate, and the municipality taking it to the OMB was too expensive for them to take on. So we took it on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a disheartening story, and a common story, unfortunately, that I've heard. Do you want to speak a little bit to how to the Ontario Municipal Board process and how the quarry was eventually overturned, although now it's trying
still
to
in play
rear its head again?
Yeah, so we started off, because the municipality wouldn't take it to the OMB, we decided that we were going to take it to the OMB because really in the end, we're protecting what we already have. You know, we were here, we have a certain way of life that we've become accustomed to with the sounds of birds chirping in the background, and that would all be muffled out by trucks. So we took it to the OMB. I have to admit, I spent most of my OMB, it was my mat leave. So through a lot of the OMB, I was in the OMB with 2 babies. It was a long process. We were in there for days, and I think the disheartening part is we couldn't go after every issue that we felt passionate about. we really had to kind of cast our net out there, because for every issue, lawyers are involved, there's planners involved, there's experts, and those things can go back and forth between all these parties, and the bills really do add up. In the end, we did lose the OMB, but we then we asked for leave for appeal, which got us to divisional court, which is not a small task. And I do thank Eric Gillespie for getting us there. And they finally came back in 2018 with a decision in our favor. And it turns out that with everything the municipality had approved, there was no mitigations in any of those approvals to protect the residents. So it kind of felt like a rubber stamping process.
And now the owner is applying again.
Yeah, so his application still stands, and right now everything is held up based on a haul route agreement.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, I've seen this kind of thing before. We kind of call these zombie quarries, where even after they get shut down because of these issues, they can just rear their heads again, and that's part of the process that desperately needs to be fixed. I mean, also obviously the David and Goliath types of fights, like you mentioned, the amount of money it takes, the lawyers, the experts that you need to find and pay to testify. I mean, it's all part of the problem. And I think that actually brings us to, I mean, you had also mentioned the municipality and how the municipality felt pressured by the province to make the rezoning change. And so part of what the RGMC has been doing is reaching out to municipalities and asking municipalities to endorse the moratorium. And what we found is that there is a lot of appetite for that, because municipalities do feel powerless to protect their citizens and to protect their constituents in this from the industry. And so I'll actually turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about how we've been doing with that municipal campaign.
Well, Katie, the municipal support has been growing, and there's been endorsements by almost 20 municipalities and more. But what I wanted to do, if it was all right, I just wanted to highlight what Becky was saying about overwhelming community support that moved the council along. And you know, and I say this partly to Ashley, who's listening in and is a beginning of her journey, that it's really, really important, mobilizing community support to demonstrate to the municipal council that you're opposed is very significant. And we know that recently in Wilmot Township, 60 people delegated to the Wilmot Township Council. It was a record. The previous to that, the record for delegations to a council meeting was 25, and they got 60 delegations. And the council, which had been, for all intents and purposes, for the last 2 years, looking like they were going to support the zoning change, voted unanimously to deny the zoning. And that was significant. And I think that's what I'm hearing from Becky and Janet from their story. And I think it's really important for us to let people know about that success. It's not guaranteed, it's not easy. And people like Becky and Janet, and now you, Ashley, you're people we need to lift up. You're leading very, very important struggles, and the people can recognize that. And when Katie talks about David and Goliath, I think it's more appropriate to say Davida and Goliath. And in these Davida and Goliath stories, there are a lot of people who are and can't be sympathetic to what you're doing. And so that on the ground organizing is really, really important. I'd be interested to talk offline a bit with you, Becky, about the divisional court hearing, and again, whether or not how important it was that the community support was there for that as well. Because what does it does make these issues political in a good way. And as this again, Ashley, this is partly for your benefit, if you don't mind me saying this. The application process is structured to be kind of a bubble that they draw you into to make the process not be political. And your MPP most likely will say to you, well, we have to I can't have an opinion. We have to let the process play out. Well, the process is designed to take you into a corner where they can say no to you. And you really have to make it loud and noisy. And I see already you're doing that with your billboards, and it's not my intention here to be giving you unsolicited advice, but these stories that we know from other places, it's really important for communities to be organized in this way and to take action. And as Katie said at the top of the program, there's no other organization that's in place to advocate for everybody across the province. And that's part of why the coalition came into being, so that we can ask people to support you, Ashley, in your community, and that we can connect you with people like Becky and connect people like Becky and Janet with others, so that we can raise all these issues up together. Katie, I saw a note in the chat box that Marilyn Capriol is here and would like to say a few words. And so I'm hoping that Marilyn, you can turn your microphone and your video on, I think, and maybe Katie, you and Marilyn can have a conversation. And then after that, we'll talk about taking action and moving forward. Marilyn, do you want to join us?
Absolutely. Thank you much for the opportunity.
Hi, Marilyn. It's so great to have you here. Just for others on the webinar, Marilyn Capriol is an elder from Shawanaga First Nation and has been a great supporter of the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. She's done excellent openings for many of our rallies and really focused us on kind of the 7th-generation issues that are relevant to this issue. So Marilyn, yeah, I'd love to turn it over to you and hear some words from you.
Okay, I'm not going to turn my video on because we are just in the transition of moving from the mainland back to my home on the island. And if I turned it on, first my hairdo looks like a Georgian Bay flutter, so you'd all be screaming. Anyway, Mino, the big Mina Kinawaya, the Vish Kradish Nakazama Quado Dam, Shawanago Donjaba, Minado Gaming. My name is Water, and I gave greetings to everyone, every living thing. Mina Kinawaya, that's what that means, everything. My ancestors were the water travelers here on the Georgian Bay for as long as our stories can remember in our ancestry. The markings of natural ceremonial places put here from the beginning of time are numerous. They're beautiful. The medicine beds that are still here are beautiful and natural medicines without synthetic being, without dust from a roadway. And I call this a pure land, as everything was from the beginning. As a native grandmother, it is very difficult for me to listen to the heartbreak of other people voicing their territory's home place, the place you call home. We all went through a gift of a horrific storm, and our belief is that those storms that Creator sends, is our Earth woman needs that help. The dryness of her body, the suffering of our animals, and the suffering of people. We lost many relatives in the Mitig, in the tree family. Everyone is talking about the little trees, or, you know, the less amount of trees that were along their city roads there falling down. And when those trees left us, that lacks less oxygen for our babies to play, Earth Woman to breathe. I encourage you not to stop advocating. It is very difficult to understand, and you think that words are written to dissuade all of blockades. I encourage you to find your Indigenous partners in the place that you call home. With that storm, I am positive that ceremonial grounds that have laid quiet for many years have been lifted up. The rock paintings that are here, when people talk about, oh, is it okay, we can record? Our people, yours and mine, had the technology thousands of years ago to leave us some marking, a story that they were here. Look for those. We had here in this place on the French River, the Miceli, used to be originally called Beaver River, French River, before the travelers came. And there was a big storm, just much like it is. This happened within the last 15 years. And sure enough, the people were trying to protect an area for papacy, the woodpeckers. They wanted to make camp trails and things like that for people to come and look at. But when you open those doorways, you open many, many hardships for the land, for yourself, for what you live to advocate for, to be friends with the land, the water, sky world, the flyers, the ones that swim. After the big storm came, and this other part of the project was a trade offer to influence the people of the territory to allow a hydro dam to come through. And if they had done that, they would have buried and destroyed the sacred potholes that grow in the natural stone holes in the ground. We call those potholes. Some of them are so big over here. One locally is 7 feet across and 13 feet deep down. That is a natural process to create that, and they are a sacred being. After that storm, we walked the shores over there looking for different places and more potholes, and we came across a big pine tree that had fell over, lifted her skirts from the rocks, and there was a gift of Creator from the very beginning of time. And in those rocks on the shoreline were 2 stone canoes, shaped like canoes, exactly, and a larger one that had a rope, what we would think a rope, tethering the younger one. And that is a message too, of which would take 6 days to talk about, and then we'd eat. That wouldn't have happened without that storm that came, that wind, that rain, the thunder and lightning dancing, sounding the big drum from the sky world. I would find your Indigenous partners. They're your neighbors. You are theirs. Work together. Ask for that help to read the land. There are no words that I know in my lifetime, and I'm getting to be an old girl, older, that can replace those values. I wish I could go around, but this thought of breaking grandmother's back has got to stop. When we trade her body for money, it causes ill health to the air, to the animals, to you, to the trees, things that we eat. There's a forever gas that is released from her body. That's serious. Okay, I could go on talking and talking and talking, but I think I've said my share. If you need me to help you, I'm in. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for being with us on this journey. You've been very, very generous with your time up to now, and your words are inspiring, and we appreciate them very much. Katie, I think we're heading into the last part of the meeting, and there's a take action slide that I think we're about to see. And these are some, this is from the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition website. So there's a voting take action kit, which is says, ask your candidate if they give a damn. We keep saying Reform Gravel Mining Coalition because we're being full in our description tonight, Katie, but it's the DAM campaign, the Demand a Moratorium Now campaign. So we've created some materials to ask your candidate if they give a damn. You can click on that and you can see, you can download a sign that you can print and put in your window. You can download questions to ask your candidate around the moratorium, an email that you can send to your supporters. If you want to ask your council, your municipal council, to support the moratorium, you click on that and there are a list of resources there for you, including a draft resolution, speaker's notes, videos, and a kit with all the information you need to present to your council. You can sign and share the petition. I think we're over 5,900 signatures on the petition right now, and our goal is to get to 6,000, and we're at 5,948. So if you haven't signed the petition, please do so. And Ashley, you're, as a person who's here with a new group, it would be wonderful if you took that petition link and circulated it to your contact list. And anybody else here who's new or hasn't done that yet, if you would send the petition to your contact list, our goal would be to get to 6,000 in the next week. And then finally, we have a kit as well, the information you can download, and you can write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper in support of the moratorium. Now, on top of all that, we mentioned the voting action kit. I wanted to say a little more about this. As you know, we're in the middle of a provincial election. And we've worked very hard in the past 6 months, pardon me, and the three opposition parties, the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens, have all endorsed a moratorium. They've used different language to do that. And Rachel, if it's easy for you, I'm going to ask you to bring up the graphic to share with people so they can see the statements that the parties have made. We did reach out to the Conservative Party early in this campaign and asked for a meeting with the Minister, Greg Rickford, and that request was, his office declined to meet with us. So there's been no statement by the Conservative Party, but it's our expectation that they would not support a moratorium. So we're encouraging, urging, advising you to vote for the candidate in your riding who has the best chance of defeating a Conservative candidate. So that means if currently you have a member of an opposition party as your representative, incumbents have the best chance of being re-elected. Please vote for an incumbent. If your representative was a member of the PC party, then we encourage you to do some homework. There's lots of information out there. to help you with this, to identify who the most likely candidate is to defeat the Conservative. Rachel, this is very pretty and very helpful, but I'm just wondering if you have the other slide handy from the Green Prosperity Survey that provides just a little bit more information. So that's all the action that people can take. There's links in the chat box. We're getting close to wrapping up, Katie, and I'm just wondering if there's anybody who has a last question they want to put in the chat box. And while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, and while Rachel's looking for that slide, Katie, I'm wondering if there's any closing comments you want to make. You've been very active with these groups in Eastern Ontario. Anything you'd like to add based on what you've heard tonight?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind is earlier, Mike, you were talking about how the process to review applications doesn't take into account the connections inherent in sort of the environment. The one thing I was thinking of that goes along with that is it also doesn't take into at all into consideration the cumulative effects of multiple gravel pit applications, in one area or one watershed at the same time. So I just want to point to another resource on the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition website where you can access the map that Kathryn is actually referring to find out where and how many existing gravel pits are in your area, but also where there's new applications for gravel pits in your area. And then another resource I just wanted to, because we talked a little bit, we're very focused on the provincial election, as we should be right now, but also on our website you can find lots of tools and resources to approach your municipal councils and ask them to endorse the moratorium, because as we know, it won't be it'll just be a hop, skip, and a jump between the provincial election and municipal elections as well.
So Katie, I think we're gonna close here. Thank you everybody for joining. We've got a recording we're gonna play for you of Sarah Harmer singing the Escarpment Blues, which is good positive energy to end the night on and to take forward into the next phase of the campaign. We're going to be sending out an email soon to everybody. Tuesday, June the 7th, save the date. We're going to have an online meeting with everybody to talk about the results of the provincial election and the impact for our campaign and what some of the steps are going to be going forward. So save June the 7th. We'll be sending you information soon about that, so you can RSVP. As the music plays, we're happy to receive any last comments you have in the chat box, and we'll leave the meeting open for a couple of minutes after the music ends so that you can respond to the chat box, and then we'll see you next time. Next time we'll have the opportunity to see each other is June the 7th. Vote. Tell your friends to vote. Tell your supporters to vote. Tell them that a moratorium and stopping pits unnecessary gravel mining is a #1 issue, and tell them all the good reasons they should not vote Conservative for those in this provincial election. A minority government is the best opportunity we have to protect the environment and win a moratorium on new gravel mining approvals in Ontario. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Katie and V, for co-hosting. Thank you to our guests, Ashley and Janet and Becky and Kathryn. Thank you behind the scenes to Rachel and Horeen, who've organized and produced the meetings. Mostly thank you to all of you for all you do and all the work we do together. And we'll be seeing you again soon. And now we're gonna have a little music.
If they blow a hole in my backyard, everyone is gonna run away, and the creeks won't flow to the Great Lake below. Will the water in the well still be okay? If they blow a hole in the backbone across the muscles of the land. Oh, we might get a load of stone for the road, but I don't know how much longer we can stand. We'll need to build some new apartments, and I know we're gonna have to fix the roads. But if we blow another hole in the escarpment, the wild ones won't have anywhere to go. If they blow a hole in my backyard, everyone is gonna run away, and the creeks won't flow to the great lake below. Will the water in the well still be okay? And we'll keep driving on the blind line if we don't know where we wanna go. And even knowledge that sound can get watered down. The truth can get sucked out the car window. The truth gets sucked out the car window. We're 2/3 water. What do we really need but sun and showers, soil and sea? We're 2/3 water. The aquifers provide. Deep down in the rock, there's a pearl inside. If they blow a hole in my backyard, everyone is gonna run away, and the creeks won't flow to the great lake below. Will the water in the well still be okay if they blow a hole in the backbone, the one that runs across the muscles of the land? Oh, we might get a load of stone for the road, but I don't know how much longer we can stand. Oh, we might get a load of stone for the road, but I don't know how much longer we can stand.
Thank you all for being here. We hope you have a really good night. And we'll talk to you soon. And we'll send an email with the recording out later on. Have a good night.